There's a folder on your Windows 11 machine right now, sitting in near plain text form, that contains the keys to almost every account you've ever saved in your browser. And a piece of malware that costs $10 on Telegram can empty it in under 4 seconds. Your banking login, your email, the password you've used for a decade across 40 different sites. Gone. Not in some hypothetical future scenario where you click the wrong link. Right now, at this exact moment, if your machine has been touched by any of the dozen major InfoStealer families active in 2026, those credentials are already sitting in a log file on a foreign server, priced between $3 and $15, depending on how much of your digital life they contain. I've spent the last month reading threat intelligence reports, talking to researchers, and watching how these logs get traded. And what I'm about to show you is not alarmist. It's just what's happening. Let me walk you through exactly what security researchers have been documenting throughout 2025 and into this year, because the scale of this is something most people still haven't processed. InfoStealers are not new. Malware that grabs saved passwords has existed for over a decade. What changed is the business model and the volume. SpecOps Software, a credential-focused security firm, reported that InfoStealers harvested over 2 billion credentials in 2024 alone. 2 billion. That number didn't shrink in 2025. It grew. Families like Llama, Redline, Vidar, SteelSea, and the newer. Rhadamanthys have turned credential theft into a subscription service. You pay a monthly fee, you get a custom build, you spread it through fake installers, cracked software, malicious ads, or YouTube comments pointing to what looks like a legitimate download, and the logs come back to a dashboard. Clean interface, searchable, exportable. Here's the technical piece that matters. To you, specifically, because it's the part Microsoft keeps not fixing in any meaningful way. When you click Save Password in Chrome, Edge, or any Chromium-based browser on Windows, that password gets encrypted using something called DPAPI, the Data Protection API built into Windows. That sounds secure, and in isolation it is. But DPAPI's design ties the encryption key to your user session, which means any program running as you on your machine can ask DPAPI to decrypt those passwords. No prompt, no warning, no additional authentication. The InfoStealer just walks in, says, "I am the user, please decrypt this," and DPAPI complies. Researchers at SpyCloud and Flashpoint have been publishing on this architecture for years. It's not a bug, it's how it was designed. Now, stay with me on this part, because Microsoft did try to harden this in late 2024 with something called app-bound encryption in Chrome. The idea was to bind the key to a specific application so malware running outside the browser couldn't just grab the saved data. Within weeks, public bypasses appeared. By early 2025, researchers including the team at Esentire had documented multiple InfoStealer variants that had already worked around it. By mid-2025, the protection was effectively neutralized for any attacker paying attention. I'm not saying this to be cynical, I'm saying it because this is the pattern. Protection ships, bypass ships faster, users assume the new lock works, and the theft continues quietly. And there's a second wrinkle most people never hear about: session cookies. Even if your saved password is never touched, modern InfoStealers grab the authenticated session cookies sitting in your browser profile, which lets an attacker log into your accounts without needing the password at all. They don't steal the key to your house. They photocopy the U-shaped permission slip that got you past the front door this morning. And then there's the recall situation, which I want to be careful and measured about because it's become a flashpoint. Microsoft rolled out Recall, the feature that takes periodic snapshots of your screen to make everything searchable, to Copilot plus PCs through 2025. The company made changes after the initial backlash. Encryption, opt-in, Windows Hello gating. But Kevin Beaumont, a well-known security researcher who has tracked Recall since its announcement, demonstrated in late 2024 and into 2025 that the stored data, while encrypted at rest, could still be accessed by a process running as the logged-in user once the machine was unlocked. That's the same trust model as DPAPI. If malware is on your machine and you are logged in, the protection model assumes the attacker is you, which means if you ever typed a password into a form, the Recall was watching, or viewed a sensitive document, or read a one-time code from your email, it may live in that snapshot database. Think about what that means for you. Not just saved passwords in the browser anymore, anything that crossed your screen. Real-world impact looks like this. A freelance graphic designer I'll call Priya, composite of cases I've read, downloads what she thinks is a cracked version of a design tool from a torrent site. She's done this for years. This time, the installer carries a Llama variant. Within 90 seconds of execution, it's exfiltrated her Chrome profile, her Discord token, her crypto wallet extensions, and a pile of session cookies. 3 days later, her Instagram is taken over and her followers are being DM'd investment scams. A week later, her freelance payment platform shows a withdrawal she didn't authorize. She didn't click a phishing link. She didn't fall for a scam. She reused a workflow that had worked for years on a Windows machine whose default posture trusts every program you run as much as it trusts you. Here's the part that really gets under my skin, and I want you to sit with this for a moment. Microsoft has known about the architectural weakness of browser-based credential storage on Windows for years. Apple solved this a long time ago with the keychain, which requires an explicit user authentication prompt for sensitive items. Every major password manager solved this with master password gating, biometric unlock, and auto-lock timers. The fix is not technically mysterious. The fix is requiring a second factor, a prompt, a fingerprint, a PIN, before decrypting a stored credential, and not keeping the decryption capability ambient across every process in your session. That's it. That's the whole fix. And it is not shipped as a default. Why? Because friction kills adoption, and adoption is the product. Microsoft's business in the consumer OS space is no longer just selling you a license. It's keeping you inside an ecosystem that feeds Edge usage, Bing search volume, Copilot engagement, Microsoft 365 subscriptions, and advertising identifiers. Every extra prompt between you and a saved password is friction. Friction makes people switch to a third-party password manager, or worse, a Chromebook. So the architectural decision keeps favoring smoothness over safety. Data from the Identity Theft Resource Center in their 2024 annual report showed credential theft continuing to be the dominant vector behind account compromise. The companies are aware, the researchers are screaming, the default posture does not change, and the AI layer coming on top of all of this makes the pressure worse, not better. Every new assistant feature wants broader read access to your files, your screen, your clipboard, your typing. Each one individually sounds reasonable. Stack them together, and the trust boundary between you and the operating system basically stops existing. It's like living in a house where the front door has a great deadbolt. But every window's unlocked, and the builder keeps telling you the deadbolt is industry leading. They're not wrong about the deadbolt. They're just deliberately not talking about the windows. And when you finally look for yourself, you realize the windows have been open the whole time you've lived there. That's where the betrayal comes in. Not the existence of the vulnerability, the quiet normalization of it. If you've felt for a while that something about how much your computer knows is off, that your machine feels less like a tool and more like a witness, you're not being paranoid. You're paying attention. So what can you actually do about this? Let me show you. All right, deep breath. Because the fix is simpler than the problem, and I'm going to show you a 4-layer defense that costs nothing and takes about 20 minutes to set up. We're going to stop storing credentials where they're trivially harvestable, add friction that malware can't easily bypass, cut off the paths these info stealers use to land on your machine in the first place, and finally check whether you've already been compromised so you know what to rotate. 4 layers. Each one takes the next one's leftovers. Layer 1 is the credential store itself, and this is the single highest impact change you will make. Stop saving passwords in the browser. I know that sounds like a huge ask. It isn't. Install a dedicated password manager. Bitwarden is free and open source and has been audited publicly. 1Password and Dashlane are the leading paid options. Whichever you pick, the critical property is that it requires a master password or biometric unlock to decrypt individual entries, and it auto-locks on a short timer. Once installed, go into Edge or Chrome, open the password settings, export your saved passwords to a CSV, import that CSV into your new manager, and then, this is the step most people skip, go back into the browser and delete every saved password and turn off the Offer to Save Passwords feature. If the credentials are not sitting in the browser store, the info stealer has nothing to decrypt. $0, about 10 minutes. Layer 2 is hardening the Windows account itself so that the ambient trust model has less to work with. Open Settings, go to Accounts, and enable Windows Hello with either a PIN or biometric. Then enable Dynamic Lock if your machine supports it, which auto-locks when your paired phone leaves range. More importantly, do not run as a local admin for your day-to-day account. Create a separate standard user account for daily browsing and email, and keep an admin account only for installing software. This is the oldest security hygiene recommendation in the book, and almost nobody does it on home machines. It matters because many InfoStealer variants gain additional capabilities when running under an admin context. Standard user is not a silver bullet, but it significantly narrows the blast radius. Free, about 5 minutes. Layer 3 is the delivery vector. InfoStealers don't teleport onto your machine. They arrive via 3 dominant paths in 2026. Malicious ads that lead to fake installer pages impersonating legitimate software like 7-Zip, OBS, or Notion, YouTube comments and video descriptions linking to cracked software or game cheats, and malicious browser extensions that slip past casual review. Install uBlock Origin in your browser for any software download. Go directly to the vendor's actual domain, not a search result. Audit your installed browser extensions right now. go to the extensions page, and for anything you don't recognize or haven't used in months, remove it. Be particularly skeptical of any extension that requests permission to read and change data on all websites, because that permission is exactly what credential grabbing extensions need. Free, about 5 minutes. Layer 4 is the audit. This is the one that tells you where you already stand. Go to haveabeanpawn.com and enter your primary email addresses. This site, maintained by security researcher Troy Hunt, aggregates known breach data and will tell you which breaches your address appears in. Separately, Mozilla Monitor and the breach check features built into most password managers will do similar lookups. If anything sensitive appears, banking, email, anything with payment information, treat those passwords as burned and rotate them immediately, using the new password manager to generate long random replacements. Prioritize your email account first because email is the master key. If an attacker controls your inbox, they can reset everything else. After email, work through finance, then social media, then everything with a stored payment method. And turn on two-factor authentication everywhere it's offered, preferably using an authenticator app rather than SMS, because SMS can be hijacked via SIM swap attacks that have been trending upward throughout 2025, according to the FBI's annual Internet Crime Report. Even if a stolen password gets sold in a log, tomorrow, two-factor stops the attacker from walking into the account. Free, about 15 minutes for the audit, and an ongoing habit after that. Integrated, those 4 layers move you from the default Windows posture, where one successful InfoStealer infection empties everything, to a posture where the attacker would need to beat your dedicated password manager's master password, defeat your authenticator app, and get past breach monitoring before doing meaningful damage. Total cost, $0 if you use the free tiers. Total time, roughly 20 to 30 minutes. Compared to what a single account takeover costs in recovery time, money, and emotional wear, it is the best trade in personal security available to you today. A few honest caveats, because I promised I'd be straight with you. This hardening is about credential hygiene. It is not a replacement for Windows Defender, Smart Screen, or controlled folder access, all of which you should keep enabled. It is not a substitute for keeping Windows and your browsers patched, which remains the single most important thing you can do. If you're on a managed enterprise machine, some of these steps may conflict with your IT policy. Check with your admin before making account changes. And if your threat model is higher than the average consumer, journalist, activist, high net worth individual, anyone publicly prominent, you need to layer hardware security keys, full disk encryption with pre-boot authentication, and probably a clean OS reinstall on top of all of this. For everyone else, the 4 layers above close the gap that the default posture leaves open. Zoom out with me for a second, because the specific tools matter less than the mindset shift. The reason your passwords are at risk in 2026 is not that Windows is uniquely broken. It's that the default posture of modern consumer computing assumes every program you run deserves the same trust level as you do. That assumption made sense in 1995 when you installed 3 programs a year from shrink-wrapped boxes. It makes no sense in a world where you might execute hundreds of untrusted pieces of code a week through browser tabs, extensions, installers, and background updaters. The fix is not waiting for Microsoft to redesign the trust model. The fix is you drawing your own lines, deciding which programs get to see what, which credentials live where, and what gets a second factor before it unlocks. That's the assume compromise mindset in a single sentence. Not paranoid, not catastrophic, just realistic. Build the system so that one bad download doesn't cascade into a full digital identity wipeout. Your machine, your terms. That's the whole philosophy, not Microsoft's default. Not whatever the out-of-box experience steered you into. Yours. You're not being difficult for caring about this. You're not being paranoid for moving your passwords out of the browser. You are doing what the security-conscious minority has done for years, and you're joining a growing group of people who have decided that convenience is not worth unconditional trust. Millions of us are making these choices. The ecosystem is shifting, slowly, toward the direction we're pulling it. You started this video worried that your passwords might already be stolen. If you've been on Windows for any meaningful length of time and never used a dedicated password manager, the honest answer is some of them probably are, sitting in a log, somewhere, waiting for someone to care enough to weaponize them. That is not a reason to panic. It is a reason to act this week. Install the password manager. Export and purge the browser store, harden the Windows account, audit the extensions, run the breach check, turn on two-factor. In a week, you'll be in a materially better position than 90% of the Windows users around you. And the specific malware families I mentioned at the start of this video will find nothing worth taking from your machine. If this helped you secure your system, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next threat warning. I cover these issues the moment they're discovered, not weeks later when everyone else finally reports it, and I go deeper than the surface level coverage you'll find on most tech channels. Drop a comment and tell me which layer you tackled first. I read all of them, and the patterns in what people struggle with tend to become the next video.